What keeps you lacing up your shoes every day? Your own joy? Or someone else's applause? Welcome back. I'm Tommy. This is That's Runnable. And today we're talking about two different types of motivation. Intrinsic and extrinsic. Or internal and external. I'll likely interchange those terms throughout the episode, because I just find internal and external easier to say, so we'll go with that. How are you? Are you good? Have you been looking after yourself lately? Are you out on a run right now? If you are, I'm proud of you. So I wonder why you're not so proud of yourself. Well, you should be, because you're out there, you're working on yourself, you're doing the work, you're pounding the pavements, you're dancing over the trails, and you should be proud of that. Well done. Today we're talking about internal and external motivation. It's a topic that I think is fundamental if you're thinking about long-term growth in the sport, and I think it's fundamental if you're thinking about being motivated by the right reasons. But there is some detail to it that I think we can dive into. We will have some listener questions at the end as well, so stay tuned for that. And there's no sponsor this week for the episode, so we can actually just dive straight in. So I wanted to start with a personal story, actually. Something that I think maybe a lot of people will have struggled with, or it might be quite a similar story to your own, I don't know. But when I started running, when I was about 17, 18, I started for all the right reasons. I started for intrinsic reasons, to escape my own mind. I was someone who had I have always had a bit of a fast-moving, overthinking mind. So I needed to escape, I needed to get out there and expend some energy, and it was an easy way to do that. I did it for my own health, both mental and physical. I knew that I needed to maintain good physical health, and running was a way to do that. And I did it for self-pride. Each day I wanted to work on myself. I knew that as I started to get into it, I knew the feeling of pride that I felt after each run. So I was doing it for the right reasons initially. But eventually I sort of fell into the trap of comparison. The comparison trap. As I improved, as I dedicated more of my time to running, as I sort of fell more in love with it, I started to fall into the comparison trap, started to compare myself to others, to care more about my pace, my race times, my Strava stats, all that stuff. And my motivation for running and how I performed in each run went from healthy, intrinsic, internal motivations to slightly less healthy, extrinsic, external motivations. I was doing it for others. I was doing it to portray a certain image about myself. And sure enough, that damaged my relationship with the sport itself and damaged my relationship with myself. And that happened for some time. I still had intrinsic motivations to run. I still cared more about going out there and feeling proud of myself and putting in the work every day. But it was sort of masked with, or at least dominated by, motivations that weren't as self-serving, weren't as healthy for myself. And it was only until I found ultra running, really, that I could sort of merge the performance aspect of my running with intrinsic motivations. It was when I found ultra trail running and the community in that side of the sport where I could marry everything I loved about the sport, the performance side of things, with all of the personal intrinsic benefits that I gained and I knew deeply about. So why does this topic matter? Well, there's sort of a balance between internal and external motivation that I really believe is important for runners, especially if you're thinking about long-term sustainability and mental health gains. If you're looking to have this practice, this running practice in your life for a long period of time, it's important to balance both internal and external reasons why you run. I see so many runners doing it for shallow reasons, and I don't believe this is long lasting. I don't believe that if you have the wrong reasons, if you're running for the wrong reasons, if you're just running to prove something to others, I don't believe this is a sustainable way to approach the sport. Fundamentally, I believe that the personal growth and development benefits of running are just so important, and I believe in them. I believe that they're the most important thing. It's kind of why I do this. And I think that we should be focusing on having running in our lives for a really long time. It's sort of what I'm all about. To, as much as we can, look after our physical health and our mental health so that we can engage with the sport of running in some capacity long into our lives. So, today we're going to be breaking down this topic with 5 points. I have 5 points for you. The first is, what are internal and external motivations? So we're going to have a go at sort of defining them quickly. The second, the risks of relying on external motivations alone. Then we'll talk about why internal motivation is more sustainable. We'll then talk about striking the right balance between the two, and we'll finish up with warning signs and how to recalibrate. So, are you with me? Are you ready to dive into point one? Let's do it. So, what are internal and external motivations? What are internal and external motivations? Let's start with external motivation, or extrinsic motivations. External motivations are things like running for medals, social media likes, recognition, things that require others in the evaluation of their value or their measurement. Things that require an audience, recognition from others. They're external motivations. Whereas internal motivations could be things like running for simply personal satisfaction, joy, growth, personal growth and development. Internal or intrinsic motivations are the reasons that you keep showing up even when there's no race in sight. It's the stuff that if no one knew you were doing it, you still would. So some more examples of internal motivations might just simply be feeling the thrill of finishing a tough run, knowing that you want to have that feeling of elation after a tough run. It might just simply be appreciating nature. For many of us, definitely myself included, there's an appreciation of feeling like you're part of nature, running through nature, being present in that moment, running through the forests. That's an intrinsic motivation to run, to get out there. And if we dive deeper into personal growth, it might be that just forming a practice of stepping out of the door every day is something that you really value and you know will develop you as an individual. And some more examples of external motivations could be as simple as sort of posting race times online. A lot of people like to post their Strava stats. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do. A lot of people want to make sure they have a nice, smooth Strava volume curve. You know, the Strava graph. It might be that you're motivated to show up because you just want to show people that you're consistent in that sense. It might be achieving PRs for others' approval. It might even be looking to get podium spots. And there's a spectrum. You know, most runners are motivated by a mix of the two. And that is okay. It really is okay. It's about finding the balance. So have a think about what dominates the reasons you train for you. Right now, have a think about it. Take a moment to just think, why do I do this? Why, truly why, am I showing up every day? Is it filled with motivations that necessitate approval? Or is it for personal growth? Is it just something that lights you up? Have a think. I have actually quite often been ridiculed for only doing what I do, only running ultra marathons because I want to post about it online. I personally know that that's not the reason I do it, but it often looks like that because I'm posting about it. I mean, the real reason why I do it is for intrinsic personal reasons. I was running ultra marathons. I was running before I started posting about it. I had dreams of running 100 miles before I started sharing my journey online and trying to offer tips to others online. I know the reasons why I do this. And I know that if the reasons I did this were simply to shout about it online, to post about it, to quote unquote show off, it wouldn't be very long lasting. And I wouldn't keep signing up for these things. I wouldn't be obsessed like I am. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to face up to that because, you know, I'm someone who, I'm obsessed with this stuff. I love it. I love talking about it. I love doing it. I love creating videos about it. It's a real sort of ticks both boxes for me, both a love for the sport, but also a love for documenting a hobby, and it's a creative outlet for me. When I post races online and that sort of stuff, I find that fun. But of course, many people might think that I do that for extrinsic reasons. But that's not the case, and I know that not to be the case, so there we are. So there's a spectrum. We have both internal and external, or intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, and there's a spectrum, and it's good to have both. It's sometimes necessary to have both to really push yourself, to really show up. But it's about striking the balance. So have a think to yourself right now about what it is. And actually throughout this episode, have a think about your own motivations. Why are you truly doing this? Why are you showing up? Why are you aiming high? Are they internal? Proper, internal, deep, personal reasons? Or are they simply and only and merely for others' approval? Okay, the risk of relying on external motivation. This is the second point. The risk, or the risks, of relying on external motivation. So I want to talk about the comparison trap for a second. We all know about it. We all know the phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. It really is, you know? And in the age of social media, it's quite easy to be scrolling through. If, like me, over the last few years at least, your feed has been dominated by running content, then it might be that you're scrolling through and falling into the trap of comparing yourself to others. And that's not fun. And it's very difficult to feel okay about yourself and your own accomplishments when you are ultimately constantly comparing yourself to others. Focusing on others' achievements can come with its risks. It can come with the risk of leading to burnout, dissatisfaction, feelings of inadequacy. And they're not good, are they? And it could be that you're waiting on others' approvals. If you are relying on external motivation alone, if you're signing up for races to be validated by others, if your goals are to get a certain time and a certain distance of race, and you're doing that so that you gain others' approval, there is huge risk in this. Because external rewards fade. External rewards fade. What happens when the applause stops? What happens when you hit a plateau? When you can't improve as much as you want to improve, when you can't get to the place you want to get to because all you're looking for is that external approval. We all know someone who lives in the past. You know, that guy who is always referencing the times they used to get. Or, yeah, someone who said, I used to be able to run a 18-minute 5K. That sort of stuff. Constantly referencing their previous achievements. It's a sad look. If you're waiting on approval of others, if you're waiting on the approval of others, and the approval doesn't come, what happens? You've worked so hard to achieve a goal, not for intrinsic reasons, no, for extrinsic reasons. And what if it doesn't feel as good as you thought it would? What if when you get that time, when you achieve that goal that you've been working so hard to achieve, you've been doing it all for that applause, and it doesn't come, or it just doesn't hit? It might be that you try to knock others down. It might be that you think you deserve more applause than you're getting. And so you look to squash other people's achievements because you believe yours was more impressive or more worthy of praise. Also not a good look. You may have heard of the post-Olympic blues or post-achievement depression. Have you heard of that? Well, it's a sort of phenomenon where athletes, even those who achieve, monumental success like winning an Olympic gold medal, experience a deep sense of emptiness, loss, or even depression after their accomplishments. And it's a well-known phenomenon. It's happened to many Olympic athletes, many high-performing athletes who have ultimately been chasing goals for external validation, often not for intrinsic reasons. It's not their fault. I think quite often these elite athletes get pushed into a world where they're measured solely on their performance. They're measured on one thing. And they are only valuable as an individual, as an athlete, if they can achieve those things. And they become less valuable if they're not able to get to that level, if they're not able to achieve those goals. So why does this happen? Well, a few reasons. One could be, or is, that there is, after they achieve the goal that they've been working so hard to achieve, maybe they get an Olympic medal, they get this gold medal, let's say. It might be that they feel a loss of purpose after a singular focus. These athletes and many people, whether they're elite or not, as I talk about these Olympic athletes, think about whether it could be something you could fall into the trap of doing. They lose the purpose that they had after having a singular focus. Often they spend years, even decades, training with one singular goal in mind. The Olympic Games, or a gold medal at the Olympic Games. And then once they achieve that goal, they may feel this void because the thing that gave their life structure and meaning has suddenly gone. And then when it disappears, they no longer have a new, clear direction. And it can be really hard to find purpose. If much of their drive came from extrinsic motivations, like winning medals, receiving applause, or even achieving fame. Not saying that all Olympic athletes are looking for that. But it could be that they're trying to get these extrinsic, the validation that they're looking for externally. They're looking for these extrinsic motivations. If they achieve them, they realize that those rewards that they're looking to get, achieving fame, winning medals, getting a certain time, it might be that you're looking for a certain time in a distance, those rewards are fleeting. The moment of victory might be euphoric, but the applause fades quickly. And it could leave them wondering, what now? What do I do next? I've achieved all I ever wanted to achieve. This one singular focus. I now have it. It felt good for a small moment, but it was fleeting. And eventually, it faded. On the other hand, intrinsic motivations are far more sustainable. They are, in my opinion, better. Intrinsic motivations like passion for the sport itself, just a simple love for the activity, like we said before, personal growth. These tend to be more sustainable, but they can very easily be overshadowed by external pressures in high-stakes environments, like, for example, the Olympics. These athletes, they could have had a love for the sport once upon a time, and it's completely overshadowed by the pressure of these goals. And what they end up facing when they sort of experience this post-Olympic blues or post-achievement depression is that they have a bit of an identity crisis. I've actually seen this from many non-elite athletes who achieve goals that they've been really focused on. People run the risk of tying their entire identity to their performance or results. And when the competition ends, or when the race finishes, when they achieve their goal, they can struggle with the question, who am I without this? And that identity crisis can quite easily lead to feelings of worthlessness, inadequacy, confusion, particularly if they don't build a broader sense of self outside of their sport. You may have had this. You might not be, you almost definitely aren't, an Olympic athlete. It's very unlikely that an Olympic athlete is listening. But if you are, you may feel that was me talking about you. But if you're not an Olympic athlete, you still run the risk of feeling that post-achievement depression. If you have one singular focus, one goal in mind, and that goal is motivated extrinsically, then you might have an identity crisis when you achieve that goal, when you get there. Let me tell you about how that works for me. I've done now a few times, I've achieved a goal that I didn't think was possible for me once upon a time, running long distance ultras. And then you focus so much on achieving that goal in the phases where you're training really hard for a particular goal. That's your sole focus. It's to get to that goal, that target of yours. Then when you get there, when you finish the race and you have nothing booked in the future, sometimes it can feel like you've sort of lost, you're a bit down. That post-achievement depression, or maybe not depression, but it can be a bit of a low. And over the years, I've sort of figured out now, I think, how to mitigate this issue. So I have a few things that I want to offer out if you think you could run the risk of feeling this post-achievement depression, or just feeling a real low after you've achieved something that you're very proud of. The first sort of point on how to mitigate this is build a broader sense of self. I think it's fundamental for someone who is, like me, a bit obsessed with running. It is my great interest. I think it's really important to cultivate interests and relationships and goals outside of your running, outside of this one primary achievement. Right now, I am prepping for Devil's Gulch, which is a 100 miler in the States, and it's my big goal of the year. And I could run the risk of obsessing so much with achieving that one goal, attaching my identity to that one goal, and losing a broader sense of self. So it is of fundamental importance, of paramount importance, that I make sure to understand who I am in a broader capacity. To understand that I am more than my running, I am more than my achievements, I'm more than my goals. If you're watching this, and you're seeing me try and swat a fly, we've got some sort of fly issue going on. Too many plants in this house, I reckon. Okay, so build a broader sense of self. Second, focus on intrinsic rewards. Find joy in the process rather than just the outcome. Find joy in the process rather than just the outcome. If you've been consuming my content for a while, I think you will probably not be shocked by this one. I think most of the value in being a runner, most of the value in chasing big goals is in the chasing, not the achieving necessarily. So make sure to find joy in the process. To use the overused term of journey, it is all about the journey. And in the words of Goggins, there are no finish lines. Or does he say there is no finish line? I think he says there is no finish line. I don't know. Got to throw in a David Goggins quote every now and then. So focus on intrinsic rewards. Set new goals mindfully. It is sometimes important to ensure that post-achievement goals are meaningful and aligned with personal values. It doesn't have to necessarily be that once you achieve a certain distance, like a lot of ultra runners will sort of build up to 100 miles. And to be honest with you, there are so many races out there that get to a ridiculous distance. You could just endlessly increase the distance. So you might do a 50k and then an 80k and then a 100k and then a 140k and then a 100 miler, and then you might want to sign up to a longer distance stage race, and then you might sign up to a 200 miler and a 250 miler, and it's sort of endless. It doesn't have to be like that. Set goals that are meaningful to you in a deeper sense. It might be that you set goals that are not just not just external goals like achieving a certain distance or achieving a certain time in a distance. It might be that you set goals that are more difficult to measure, but only you can measure. Like enjoying the sport a lot more, finding more joy in the sport, finding more satisfaction in the sport. They can be goals too. And then fourthly, maybe obviously seek support. How to mitigate this? Seek support. Post-achievement blues are normal. And connecting with others, using your people who understand can really help. So lean on others. Don't do it alone. Does this resonate with your experience? Maybe you've had that before. Maybe it's something that you've struggled with. Post-achievement blues. Well, I hope that helps a little bit to think about how you can kind of mitigate how you approach post-achievement. It's sort of an interesting topic. It kind of like bridges performance and athletics with psychology and sometimes even philosophy. So I do like it. And so to sort of close out the risks of relying on external motivation, point 2, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the psychological toll of chasing external validation. Chasing external validation, chasing goals for external or extrinsic reasons can quite obviously create anxiety, imposter syndrome. It can lead to quitting. And, so often I see people sign up for marathons and doing it for the wrong reasons. I put a post out on social media not too long ago. It was actually a post that I received more slack than usual for. You can always rub people up the wrong way. But I basically was saying, if you're new to running, don't just sign up to a marathon because you think that will get you motivated. And my point here was to try and stress the importance of being motivated in the right way. So often I see people sign up for a marathon as a way to get them motivated and get them to show up. If I've got this marathon, then that means that I have to do it. Oh, I can't be seen to fail at the marathon. I can't be, I can't not complete it. Or if I don't get a certain time in the marathon, that would be embarrassing. And all these sorts of external motivations for showing up. And they're great. They're good. They can be really helpful. And for a lot of people, that can be the first thing that gets them into running. They're training for a marathon and they actually end up enjoying the process of training for a marathon. They fall in love with running and hey presto, they're a runner. But for a lot of people, and it's the same for a half marathon as well, a lot of people will sign up to a race like this and they never once focus on how to fall in love with running, how to form a more sustainable relationship with the practice, finding intrinsic reasons to run, to show up. And they do it. They go through the sort of 16-week marathon training block. It's all intense, or half marathon training block. It's all very intense. They do it. Maybe they achieve the goal, but they hated the process. And they end up just giving up on it. I never want to do that again. Such a common story. And for me, it's really important that people fall in love with the sport. I couldn't care less if you've done, a really fast marathon time and, you're proud of this achievement. For me, what's more important is that you are in love with the sport, is that you love running because you just love doing it. You do it for your own reasons. That to me is far more important than what marathon time you got. I care about the story. I care about the individual more than I care about the finish time. You do run the risk of serious psychological toll if you don't find proper intrinsic motivations. So there's some risks of extrinsic or external motivations. The comparison trap, waiting on others' approvals when the rewards fade. The high risk of post-achievement depression from a singular focus, an identity crisis after achieving that goal. We went through a couple of ways to mitigate that, and the psychological toll. Okay, third point. Why internal motivation is more sustainable. Why internal motivation is more sustainable. Finding internal reasons to run, intrinsic reasons to run, is a far more sustainable way to approach your running. The first reason for this, or the first thing I've sort of noted down, is long-term connection. Long-term connection. When you find real personal reasons, when you look within, when you really sort of think about what it is that you're trying to achieve by going out for a run, what it truly is, why are you doing this? Why are you showing up consistently? Why are you doing the thing you don't want to do? Why are you lacing up your shoes? Think deeply about it. When you find those reasons, it builds a deeper, long-lasting bond with the sport. When you find real deep reasons to run, personal reasons to run, you miss it when you can't do it. You miss not training. You miss training when you're not training. So many people who are really in love with it for the sake of doing it, not because they want to achieve certain goals, they just love what it provides them. So many people, when they're injured, you might be injured right now, you might be listening to this, you're into running, so you're listening to a running podcast, but you're injured and you can't run. And you hate it. You hate not being able to run. That's because you have real internal reasons why you do it. You just love it. Find those reasons. Because you can build this long-term connection with it. A connection with the sport that really means that if you can't do it, you miss it. You want to do it. You get excited when you think about doing it. And it builds psychological resilience as well. Intrinsic motivations help you weather setbacks. So if you are injured right now, if you're dealing with an injury, having deeper intrinsic reasons why you go through the process allows you to sort of weather those setbacks and know that even if you are slowed down in your journey to get to the goals you want to achieve, you don't mind so much because you have deeper reasons. You can lean on those deeper intrinsic reasons and motivations why you're doing this. And so you can weather those setbacks and you can sort of accept that you're going to have slower progress. I think about sometimes my worst injury yet. I think about a couple of years ago, I was injured. I say a couple of years ago now, that's crazy. I was injured, not last summer, but the summer before. And it knocked me back about 9 months. And sometimes, and through that process, I was asked quite a lot, how do you weather that setback? How do you deal with not being able to run? It's quite a common question. And it's not easy, But when you have internal intrinsic reasons, motivations why you do it, you're okay with taking your time. My experience has been that I'm okay with putting in the work to get back there and taking slower to get back to baseline because I have real deeper reasons to do it. If I had only external reasons to run, it would be much more likely that I would give up if I got injured. But I really think that having internal, meaningful reasons that you run, whether it's for your mental health, mental stability, or just simple, pure enjoyment for the sport, enjoyment for experiencing the outdoors by running, just for those reasons, I think having those intrinsic reasons, those personal reasons, makes it more likely that you're able to weather the storm of an injury and a setback. I really found in ultra running, I'm a big advocate for ultra running. It's my true love. I really found that the community in ultra running, rather than emphasizing performance and times and measuring individuals based on a finish time, it emphasizes perseverance, camaraderie, personal achievement over, the traditional metrics of success that you might find in road running and middle distance running. That was where I found my people, in the sort of those who recognize the personal reasons why we do it. In understanding that every individual has their own story. The finish line, every individual that goes over the finish line in any race has their own story. They started at a different place. They dealt with different setbacks, whether it was mental or physical. They had to overcome different setbacks to get there. It's the story, it's the journey to get there, the personal stories that fascinates me. It's the intrinsic motivations that I'm interested in. So that's sort of why internal motivation is more sustainable. It's longer lasting. Okay, fourth point here, striking the right balance. I almost delved too much into this earlier because I said it is important to have both external and internal motivations, but it's about striking the right balance. So let's dive in. So I want to acknowledge external motivation for a second. I want to acknowledge that it's natural to want recognition or rewards. It's part of being human. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be applauded for your achievements. Supernatural, very natural, very normal, very human. But the key is to not let it dominate your relationship with running. The key is to not let it dominate your relationship with running. Don't let these goals that you have for external validation, these external motivations, don't let them dominate your approach to running. Because, like we said, the applause, it's fleeting. It won't last. So, practical tips then, to sort of avoid letting it dominate your relationship with running. The first is just reflect on your why regularly. Do it often. Do it now. Why do you run? How does it align with your values? Think about that for a second. Why do you run? How does it align with your values? I do it because running is sort of an extension of my values. Putting in the work, working on myself. You can't really escape the truth of the work you put in running. There's something pure about it. My values, or the things that I'm interested in are quite often about the outdoors, my love for the outdoors, the mountains. There's something very natural about the movement that is running that I love. That's why I chose the sport of running. It's very simple. There are very few excuses that are valid that will stop me from going for a run. It's so simple. It doesn't take much time comparatively to other things, other sports. And I do it because I can. I simply do it because I can. It doesn't initially sound like a powerful reason, a powerful why. But when I think about people who can't, and I think when I think about people who can't, it's not that I'm doing it for them. I think that's slightly patronizing. It's just simply that I'm doing it because I know I can, and if I didn't, I would say that I wish I did, If I couldn't run, I would say that if I could, I would. And I really believe if you can, you should. Maybe. I think it's just something that I think sometimes grounding myself in appreciating what I have and making the most of it is really one of the most important reasons for me why I do it. When I think about the goals that I'm setting myself to run 100 miles or to do these ultras, I think sometimes about when I'm older, if I get to an age where I can no longer do these things, I would probably look back, and if I hadn't done them, I would regret not doing them. Because I know that deep down inside me, I always wanted to try and do those things. The 100-mile distance. Deep within me, I've always been fascinated by this idea of someone going over the mountains for 100 miles by foot. That's captivated my attention. I'm fascinated by it. And so I want to do it whilst I can. These are deep, intrinsic reasons why I do it. And I do it on a daily basis because it helps me. It helps me have a level head. It's quite simple, really. On the days I do run, I'm better than on the days I don't. On the day I show up and I go for a run in the morning, I show up better for the people around me for the rest of the day. It's as simple as that. It's one of the main reasons I run. Because I'm better with it than I am without it. It doesn't have to be complicated. But make sure it's intrinsic. Make sure it's personal. Make sure it's your own. So reflect on your why regularly. Set personal goals that excite you, not just goals that look good to others. I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about today, isn't it? I think running's such a great sport because there's so much you can do within the sport. You can do a tough mudder. You can do, for those who don't know what a tough mudder is, it's like I don't know if it's just UK based. It might be something that goes wider afield, further afield, but it's like an obstacle course kind of run. A lot of fun to it, but you could do something like that, or you could do an ultra, or you could do a fast 5K, or you could do maybe you did a track. Maybe it's a track ultra. You're fascinated by running around a track for that long. Maybe it's, especially in the ultra distance world, there's so many different events you can get involved in. Maybe it's Everesting a hill. There's all these sorts of events you can get involved in. Whatever excites you. The beauty of running is that you can get involved and do the thing that excites you. You can challenge yourself in a way that excites you. And that's super important. Not just goals that look good to others. There are some goals. One of the problems I have with ultra running is that very few people really understand the elevation aspect of ultra running, like the elevation gain. It's all about distance. So, you say, maybe someone might say, you ran 100K. Wow, that's amazing. But every race is different. And so no one will ever truly understand what it really took to complete one race over another. And if my motivations to do these ultras, if your motivations to do these ultras are purely extrinsic, you'll endlessly be frustrated by a lack of understanding of what it took to get there from others. But if they're intrinsic, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because you know what you're doing, you know what it took to get there. And the reasons you did it were personal. And limit comparison. So the third point, the third practical tip on sort of striking the right balance and not letting external motivation dominate your relationship with running. The third one is limit comparison by focusing on your own progress rather than others. I mean, this is easier said than done, of course. I can appreciate that. But running really is an individual sport. It's an individual endeavor. So as much as some comparison, some competitiveness maybe with your mates is healthy and can drive you to work hard, do focus on your own personal goals and your own personal progress. It's a far more healthy way to approach things. And then I would say there are some daily practices you can do to sort of implement these. Some people journal post-run about, what felt good, something that remains personal. Some people use Strava to journal in that way, but sometimes I think it's good to just sort of review each run in a private way. So some people write notes after runs. And I think also running without a watch or running without tracking anything occasionally to kind of just simply reconnect with the experience is important too. It might be that you just cover up your watch and you're just not looking at your watch as you run. That's fine too, just if you want to track for your own sake, if you want to track true volume or whatever. But yeah, trying to reconnect with the experience of running and not just the data is important too. Okay, finally we're going to talk about warning signs and how to recalibrate. Signs you're stuck in the comparison trap. At the beginning of this, I spoke about how when I started running, I did it all for the right reasons. I did it for intrinsic reasons. I was doing it just for my own self-pride and health, and I wanted to just go out for a run because I knew how good it felt and I knew it was good for me and my mental and physical health, and it was just a good relationship. And then as I got better at it, I started to fall into the comparison trap. So I wanted to talk a little bit at the end here about sort of warning signs of this comparison trap and how to recalibrate, how to get back to a point where you're focusing more on intrinsic reasons why you run. So a couple of signs you're stuck in the comparison trap that I could come up with. And there's so many, and you might kind of have your own signs. It's all a personal thing. But some for me is that, I might be feeling disappointed after my runs, even if the run ultimately has gone quite well and I've sort of met some goals. I might go on an easy run, and the whole aim of the run is to, remain with a low heart rate and go a certain distance, and that's kind of it. But I might find things in the data to be disappointed in. and I might feel like I'm not making progress because I'm only running that pace in that heart rate zone and all that sort of stuff. So that might be one sign that you're falling into the comparison trap. And I just think generally obsessing over metrics and obsessing over others' achievements is probably that sort of main, the main sign, really. I think if you're feeling bad about your running, if you're feeling negative in any way about the metrics and the performances that you're putting in, whether it's on whether you're referring to races or just your training, then these are just simple signs that you are falling into the trap of comparison. If you're thinking too much about how things look, so you're thinking too much about how it might look on Strava, you're thinking too much about someone else's achievements, then you're falling into the comparison trap. And we live now in a world where it's rife. It's everywhere. You're going to be scrolling through Instagram or whatever social media, and you're going to be seeing other people's achievements. And if you see someone else's achievement and you, rather than thinking that's sick, well done, that guy or girl is really impressive, good on them, and rather you think more about yourself and how you size up, you're falling into that trap. Really, how you compare is completely irrelevant. So how to recalibrate then? A few things on how to recalibrate when you sort of feel like you're getting stuck in that comparison trap. Take a break from competitive goals. Just sort of take a period of time where you just don't have any races, you've got nothing booked. It might be that you go to park runs and you're constantly trying to get your best time at park runs. Stop going to park runs for a bit. Or you can go to them and approach them in a completely different way. So take a break from competitive goals. Doesn't matter that much. Take a break from social media. A lot of people talk about taking breaks from social media, and very few people do. It's so easy to just whip out your phone and start looking at social media, and it just feels, even if you spend 5 minutes on it, it feels like it's not going to do anything, but you're ultimately losing yourself. You're escaping the reality of your present moment, and you're falling into the trap of looking at social media and comparing yourself. You have no control over what you see on social media and how it makes you feel. You have no control over it. The algorithms feed it to you. So there's very little you can do when you go on social media. There's very little you can do about sort of controlling what you're seeing. So be very conscious of that fact. Be cognizant of the fact that when you open social media, you are victim to whatever it serves up. So the only way you can control that is by taking a break from it. So take a break from social media. Run for pure enjoyment. No metrics, no pressure. Just going out there and just doing the running movement. Thinking about pace and all that sort of stuff is just going to make you compare yourself and think more about your performance. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just maybe go out there and just run for pure enjoyment. Do a walk run. Don't take your watch. Just go real easy. If you have a dog, go run with your dog. And sort of follow the dog and follow the dog's pace and just sort of go with it. Go by feel. No pressure. And finally, spend time in the running community that values intrinsic motivations. My advice is to spend time with the trail community. No, I'm being biased. But that's how I found it. I mean, there are so many communities out there that, they don't care about your performance. They don't care about how you size up and how good you are. Spend more time with those people. There are circles within the running space that are not going to be healthy for you to engage too much with. So spend time with people. The people that you're surrounding yourself with is really important. Spend time with people that don't value you for your achievements and how good you are. And your value to them is not based on your performance. Okay, so they're the 5 points I had. Quite a long one today. I did say it would only be half an hour, but I just started I don't know, got a bit carried away there. I hope you have enjoyed it, at least. We've spoken about what are internal and external motivations, the risks of relying on external motivation, the comparison trap, waiting on others' approvals, the post-Olympic blues and post-achievement blues, and too much focus on one singular thing, and having the risk of an identity crisis from that. We've spoken about how to mitigate that, why internal motivation is more sustainable, maintaining a long-term connection with the sport and improving psychological resilience, striking the right balance, acknowledging that external motivation is sometimes good, it's important, and it's just a natural part of being human, but making sure to not let it dominate your relationship with running. And then some warning signs and how to recalibrate. So I just want to sort of close off by talking about how external motivations are fleeting. If you are constantly focusing on external validation and applause from others, you may achieve that briefly, but it doesn't last. But the joy and purpose you find in running can last a lifetime if you nurture it. So I want to encourage you to reflect on your own motivations. Maybe sit down with yourself with a notebook, with a pen and paper, and think truly, what is your why for running? All right, then, we've reached that part of the episode where we do listener questions. So we're going to do a couple. We'll see how quickly we can get through them, but we maybe just do 2 or 3. So I recognize this is a pretty long episode. So if you're still with me, then thanks for sticking out for that long, kind of a rambly one, eh? But here we are. Let's do some listener questions. If you want to get involved, if you want to submit a question of your own and have it answered on a future episode, then go down below. If you're on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, really, there should be a link down below. If alternatively there isn't a link down below, then you can go to my Instagram or TikTok at TommyRunPT and go to the link in the bio there and actually submit a question directly in that bio link. So there you are. So to start off, we will begin with where are we looking? Here we go. Francesc.
Hi, Tommy. This is Francesc from countryside Barcelona. Currently training for a couple of trail marathons, and I'm a bit worried about not getting all the elevation gains I should get during the week. I'm not having problems with the mileage, but I work a 9 to 5, and it's currently winter right now. A lot of wildlife where I live, and I don't really want to encounter any of it because on the weekdays I have to train when it's still dark, either early in the morning or late in the afternoon. Um, should I worry about not getting enough elevation gain? I don't have a problem with it on the weekends. Um, for my long run, but is it something I should worry about, or should I just focus on it once there's more daylight available? Uh, you let me know. Thanks for the show. It's really, really good. Cheers.
Thanks, Francesc. I hope I've pronounced your name right there. Great question. I think, I think you said you're living in Barcelona. I'm a bit jealous. You've got some good hills there, but it's winter, and the only time you can train at the moment is before or after work, so it's dark. I mean, look, I think I live in London and I train for mountainous ultra marathons. It is not ideal. It is obviously suboptimal. You want to be getting more elevation in. But I think, in reality, you can do quite a lot in the gym. So what I tend to do is I try and do a lot of elevation work in the gym. So I'll just whack the treadmill up to like full max incline and just climb. It might be sort of a walking climb, doing that for a long period of time. It might be doing some kind of intervals and changing the pace of how far I'm going up. But I can use the treadmill at the very least and spend a lot of time on that. The stair stepper as well, if you're doing sort of mountainous races, there's going to be a lot of slow climbing. So the stair stepper is a great one in the gym too. So there is stuff you can do in the gym. You can get on a bike and go high resistance on a bike and build your legs, your quads up, your glutes in that way. And then just strength training generally is going to really help with elevation work, just strengthening your legs and making sure you've got more endurance in your legs for that. But you are not completely unable to do elevation. It sounds like you're getting some in during the weekends, so that's good. I think, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can, if you're doing a lot of volume and then you're getting some elevation in the weekend and you're doing stuff in the gym, I wouldn't worry too much. But obviously if you're training for like hilly marathons or hilly ultras, it is suboptimal to be training in just complete flat. But we work with what we've got, right? Thanks for the question. Let's move on to this question from Anne.
Hi, Tommy. This is Anne from France. First of all, thank you so much for your podcast and all of your content. I'm considering running my first proper trail race next spring, which would be the Otakam trail race in the Pyrenees here in France. They offer a few options in distances, and I'm hesitating between the 22 kilometers, I think, and the 45 kilometer. I'm quite new to those type of distances. I only ran 18 kilometers max in my training until now. I haven't been that consistent with training, but I've ran for a few years now. I'm only starting to run a few times a week, every week, consistently now. And I'm wondering if you think that would be enough training until the end of May next year to do the 45 one. Thank you so much.
So a difficult one. Thanks, Anne. Difficult to say, whether you should go for the 45 or go for the 20, was it 24? I can't remember. And sorry if you've already signed up. I think you submitted this question about a month ago. We are working our way through the questions. It's really dependent on what you think you can do. If it's May that you're looking to train for, I think you'd have enough time to train for it. If you're someone who, is already a runner and you've done a bit of training before, then I think you've got time to build up to that distance. It might be a real challenge, but where's the fun without the challenge? So it's really up to you. If you put in the calendar something really challenging, I think quite often you will show up and put in the work necessary. So let me know which you went for. I think it's really dependent on the individual. I would always say approach with caution, go for the sustainable. If you've never done a trail race before, maybe doing one that's just sort of 24, like a half marathon, and then being humbled by the fact that it's a lot more technical and a lot more difficult than just a flat road marathon, and there's a lot more elevation. You might need that 45k race in the mountains in the Pyrenees is going to be very challenging. So, you will have to really train hard for that. Hard to say. It's personal preference, isn't it? I hope that you went. To be honest with you, I hope that you went for the 45. Just go for it. I think most people need to just be sort of encouraged and told that they're capable. So, I would say go for the 45. Thanks, Anne. Okay, next we've got George.
Hi, Tommy. George here from High Wycombe, England. Loving the podcast and content so far. I've got a question related to training for my first marathon, which I'll be running in April 2025. I've been running moderately for about 2 years. I've done a couple of half marathons so far, but never any further than that, with a split of 4 days of strength training in the gym and 2 days running. Now that I've set my goal of running a marathon, I've gradually ramped up the volume for runs and increased from 2 days to 4 days. Along with the running sessions, I'm still hitting 4 days of strength in the gym. I'm concerned that as my running volume increases, I'm going to be doing too much. Would you suggest I drop some strength training for my plan? I'm also curious to hear from you if I should be running on days I do my upper strength training or my lower strength training for optimal results. Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, really great questioning there. So let's talk a little bit about kind of balancing strength training with marathon training or just running training generally. It always depends on what your goals are. You know, if you're doing some really heavy lifts, heavy lower body lifts, then you will impact your ability to run. So sort of managing your week appropriately and making sure that you are, you're not, let's say, doing a really heavy leg session and then the next day doing a long run or an interval session, that sort of thing. So you will have to manage your week appropriately. To give like as brief an answer as possible for the sake of just answering on the podcast, I would say, early on in your training, so like now, you can kind of play around with what works and try and figure out a kind of weekly routine where you have a decent amount of strength training, but you are also not allowing that strength training to kind of impact your running too much. I think later in the process, so once you get to kind of March, let's say, when you're in the peak phase of your training, you're going to want to really lower the amount of strength training you're doing just so that you can optimize fully for your running. Because if you want to do as well as you want to do in the marathon, the strength training will be beneficial for performance. But once you get to a point where you actually need to perform as well as possible when you're running, then you will want to drop that strength training down. I tend to sort of have phased approaches with my strength training. So when I'm in a really early phase of my training, I'll do sort of a lot more heavy lifts, a lot more strength training generally. And then I will sort of, as I progress through, I'm going to prioritize my running training. If you're doing, upper body training, that will exhaust you a lot more. So if you're doubling up, you will feel more exhausted on your running. But of course, because if you're splitting it like that and you're doing upper body training specifically, and then you're going out that same day and doing like an interval session, it's not going to have the same impact, obviously, as it will if you're doing lower body training on the same day, but it will still exhaust you. And so you will still feel, fatigued in some capacity, and you may not perform as well in that interval session, let's say. So just being careful and just sort of seeing what works for you. It is surprising how much positive effect you can get from just a little bit of strength training. So, it depends what your appetite for hard work really is, to be honest. I think that if you've got high appetite for working hard, you can eventually get to a point where you're running quite a lot and gymming quite a lot. But really look after yourself, man. Make sure that you're not overdoing it. I've done this too many times to count, and it's very easy to overdo it when you're kind of taking that hybrid approach. And just, if you're, figure out what your priorities are. If your priority is to perform well at the marathon, then make sure you're prioritizing that. The gym won't go anywhere. The weights won't go anywhere. It will take longer than you think to lose the muscle mass that you've got, and it would take it will be very quick to sort of regain that muscle mass. If you complete the marathon in April and you're happy with it, and then you're like, do you know what, I want to get back into the physical shape I was in, it will come back quicker than you first gained it in the first place. So that would be my advice. I would say you want to get to a point where you're training at least 5 or 6 times a week. If you're running a marathon, ideally you want to be doing like more than 5 running sessions a week, because that will give you the ability to kind of build based with a lot of easy training, recovery training, and quality training. And so with those 5 sessions, it might be that you just drop to 3 strength training sessions with 1 double up day a week. You might do like a lower body, an upper body, and a full body, and the upper body is the day that you double up with another session, and it might just be that you're doubling up with a recovery session that day, for example. So that would be my advice. Great question. We can do a whole episode on balancing strength training with running. So thanks, George. Okay, one more question from Bertie.
Hi, Tommy. It's Bertie here, also North London-based runner. I was just wondering, how do you decide which strength and conditioning exercises to do? I'm quite frequently just overwhelmed with how many different stretches and bodyweight exercises and Bulgarian split squats and the different varieties. So I'm wondering how you find what works for you, and how you stay consistent with it. Hope to see you out on the trail. Cheers.
Yeah, nice. It can be overwhelming for sure. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of people that kind of overcomplicate these things and make it seem more complicated than it needs to be. This is how I think about it. I think about 3 fundamental movements for running. Anyway, I think about 3 fundamental movements that will help. And doing variants of these 3 is really all I do outside of the plyometrics and that sort of stuff. So just when it comes to simple strength training, resistance training, static training, I do hinge movements, squat movements, and lunge movements. Hinge, squat, lunge. They're the basics. So, a hinge might be like a deadlift. It might be, I don't know, any sort of variant on a deadlift, Romanian single leg deadlift, those sorts of things. Squat might be, your classic squat. It might be a single leg squat on a machine. It might be a Bulgarian split squat. And then a lunge movements. It might be also kind of Bulgarian split squat is more of a lunge movement too. So those sorts of things, lunging with a weight on your back or lunging with kettlebells either side, that sort of stuff. Keeping it to those 3 and just thinking about, okay, which the exercises I'm doing, does it fit into those 3? Or you start with those 3 and then think of exercises that kind of expand on those 3 and doing single leg stuff and all that. Nice, good stuff is how I think about it. I try and keep it pretty simple. There's loads you can do. There's loads you can overcomplicate. I don't think it's worth overcomplicating it unless you're interested in doing that or unless it's necessary for strengthening a certain part of the body for injury prevention or your physio's giving you certain exercises and that sort of thing. So as soon as you feel overwhelmed by the amount of exercises, the number of exercises that are you're being bombarded by, just simplify it. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not interested in leaning in and learning more about more exercises, just simplify it. Squat, hinge, lunge, and any variant of those will get you very far. I think that's probably helpful. Big up North London. Hopefully see you out on the trails, maybe in Hampstead Heath. Thanks for the question. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. Bertie. I'll see you out there, man. Cool. Thanks so much for listening. I know this was a really long one. I actually just sort of felt like it was a really interesting topic and wanted to talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do share this episode or the podcast generally with your mates if you think they'll enjoy it. If you're kind enough, give the podcast a rating. It really helps the podcast out if there's ratings on there, and share your opinion. I think it on Apple and Spotify you can kind of comment on it, so engage in that way. It does the podcast wonders. There are no sponsors of this episode, so I can just conclude by saying thanks for listening. If you want to get involved in submitting your own question, we're going to actually do a Q&A for the next episode. So I'm going to try and go through as many of the questions as I can, kind of catch up a little bit so we're not answering questions from a month ago. So if you want to submit your own questions, you can do that with the link below as I described earlier. If you want to get involved in a race that I'm doing next year, I'm doing Devil's Gulch, which is a 100 miler in the Eastern Cascades of Washington State. So if you're out in the States, big up to those North American listeners. Listen up, you get a 10% discount. There's a code in the description below. I also have a link to Lone Wolf, which is a sort of backyard inspired race, which you also have a little discount to as well, so check that out in the show notes. Other than that, thanks for listening. I really appreciate all of the support, and run the Runnable. Keep showing up for yourself, and I'll see you next time.